All right, so welcome back. I guess this is part three. So the set works. Basically, what I'm going to do now is do some setup on it. Before I do that, I want to actually take these components all off of the neck here and clean everything under there. I can go back later and clean, whatever else, pull the chassis or whatever. But I'm kind of dying to do some setup on this and get it looking pretty decent, or as good as I can. And I'm no guru, but the steps I learned I got from other YouTubers that have done this, and friends that have worked in this business for years. And I have a great deal of gratitude to them for showing me how to do these kind of things. But again, I haven't done a million TV sets, so I'll do my best to show what I'm doing. And then you can yell at me in the comments if I do it wrong. Always looking for creative criticism, constructive criticism. So I am going to, which may not be entirely necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and discharge this tube anyway. I'm not going to mess around with the anode cap because it's not the best cap. Really what I didn't want to do was move it around because it is really not great. I really need to replace it, I think, because I don't like how it's making a connection, and I don't think it's really sealing that well to the glass. So anyway, there was really nothing in there. So now I'm going to take our cap on, or our neck CRT connector here. It'll probably stay out of the way enough. Okay, this is the blue lateral magnet. So the blue, there's three guns here. This is a delta tube. It's not an inline tube. This predated those. So there's a triangular arrangement to the guns. Top one's blue. Your green and red are on the bottom. So the blue lateral magnet adjusts the blue left and right and up and down, and your red and green are adjusted diagonally. So what the idea here is, these are the static adjustments. There's little thumb screws here. Some have magnets that pull in and out. The idea is to get a center point on the screen converged. So you manipulate these switches basically to get all the beams converged to make a white dot, as you don't have any fringing of blue, red, green, or blue. It's just a solid white. And then once you do that in the center of the screen, these controls up here are your dynamic convergence controls, and they can tweak those points and manipulate the beam at the outer edges of the screen, at top and bottom and sides. And sometimes you have to go through it a few times if you want really good results. So that's pretty much where we're at. So this blue lateral magnet, and this stuff might be stuck. I don't think it's ever been taken off. Maybe not. Now, I've actually measured these things because I don't think anyone's ever touched this. I measured them using this front of this socket connector as a reference, so I can put these back about where they were. So that comes off. And then this guy should just be on with tension. So I'm going to clean this, try and help it. It's basically held on with it's like a spring tension around it. I'm just using some plain old Windex here. Yuck. These are dust magnets. Okay. Now, being as careful as we can, we'll see if we can't get this thing to. That is on there. Gotta love that. Easy. As soon as it gets to the clean spot, Should pop right off. There we go. Nerve-wracking. Hate doing that. They also put a little bit of glue here to hold it still. Good idea at the time, but you know, you can see the glue. Yuck. Oh, yeah, there you go. So here's the blue wire, red, and then green. Put that off to the side for a second. And you can see the actual gaps in the guns here. And those are supposed to be positioned over these spaces on either side. There's one in the back for the blue lateral there. Looks like the Windex is at least getting the glue off. I wouldn't go too crazy on this coating. This grayish coating is the Aquadag, and that actually forms the ground for the tube on the outside. Basically a giant capacitor. But with enough Windex and rubbing, I'm sure it'll start to come off, so be careful with that. There we go. Now we'll go ahead and disconnect the yoke. Now the yoke is not going to be involved in our convergence adjustment, but we're going to need to adjust the yoke for the tilt of the screen and to get the purity set, and I'll show you how to do that then. Now with these actually, to get the yoke out, these thumb screws have to come all the way out. And there's only 2 on this set. We'll take our screws out, and then same kind of thing. It should just pull straight back and off. Kind of noting what's straight up. So this is up. And that's actually really easy to remove. Actually, almost seems too easy to remove. Like we're missing something. Yeah, I feel like there should be a spring back here. I have to look at another set. All right, so there's our deflection yoke. So we can clean this up. So I'm going to clean this up, and I'm going to clean these things up just a little bit, and then we'll put them back on there. Dusty. Kind of boring. Don't want to waste film and battery life, so back in a second. So there was a slight tangent, a change of plans. I continued to film this video, and I actually finished it, but I decided to stop and go back and jump off in this tangent because I had a problem where when I was converging the right-hand red-green horizontal lines, this coil wouldn't do anything. So I decided to stop and redo the video from the point of reassembling the neck, and I was going to do some work to this convergence assembly. And just to show you what I did, I think there is a common failure. Sorry about the washing machine. I found that the old resistors here had all drifted in value, not too far. They were still within 20%, but just barely. So I changed those. And then there is a rectifier pack here that has 4 diodes in it. And it's part number 212-72. And I'm not sure I think it might be selenium. Either way, they can have issues, so I think they might be considered somewhat common failure. So I take them out, and here it is. This is the original pack here. Let me zoom in on this guy. And basically what's in there is just 4 diodes. NTE 116 is what the SAM's manual calls for if you want to use individual diodes or anything that cross-references to that. I think that's 600 volt, 1 amp and they're not anything special, just rectifier diodes, though maybe you could put something better in. I just use NTE 116. So anyway, so now we're going to jump back and complete the assembly and the setup. All right, so we're back at the set here. And before I start, I'm actually going to swap out my horizontal module to this monstrosity here, which is basically a 9-9001 that has been, I've kind of transplanted it onto the top of this 957 module. Some of these old sets, at least these 9 or 25 DC56 chassis that I have, do not like VCRs a great deal. Lots of flag waving and things like that. And supposedly there's some mythical beast called a 9-57 VCR, but I've never seen such a module. So I basically took a shot in the dark and, you know, built this monstrosity. And what this does is it basically puts your horizontal hold on this board, so it completely bypasses this, the one on the chassis on these sets. But it's got the IC and everything there, a little more advanced control. But anyway, so, you know, if I could probably put up a schematic of that I made too, if that's of any interest. But I'm going to put that in back here, and I can't do it holding the camera. And then we will get into putting everything back on the neck. All right, there we go, that's in place. Okay, so we've got our horizontal board in place, and we've got our yoke here cleaned up a bit. I did pull out, I have a new old stock Thordarson yoke. It also had nothing back here, so I don't know if they expect you to move it over or if they just didn't have anything, but we're gonna give it a shot with nothing on there. So we're gonna carefully reposition this. The fun part's always getting these darn nuts back where they belong. Oh, I can never get that thing to stop beeping when I film these. Okay, from there, we'll put our convergence assembly, or convergence clover as some call it, back on. I'm actually going to put this up in the upper corner in the service position, which will be flipped up and towards the front of the set so I can make adjustments. All right, and then we're going to position this so that the blue magnet, which in this case has a blue wire, is in the 12 o'clock position, and red will be on the right and green will be on the lower left there. And the place we're going to put this according to the manual, and I will show a picture from the Zenith booklet here. So according to that, we are going to take the rear of the assembly, the plastic here. We'll have to end up at the rear of this convergence element, this circular piece here, cylindrical piece, I should say. So we'll carefully work that back on. Always hated this part. Okay. There we go. Make sure that it's perfectly centered, straight up and down here. then we're going to take our blue lateral magnet and our purity ring assembly here, and that is going to be positioned over the third grid, which is right here, this cylindrical section at the top, according to the picture which I just showed. So we're going to position that right about there. And then we'll very gently snug this down so it doesn't move. Oof, I think I just broke my lateral magnet. We might need a new one of those. Okay. Go ahead and put our connection back on here. Okay, now just to kind of explain what I'm going to do during the setup process, because unfortunately I don't have a second camera, so I can't go back and forth. The first step we're going to do, well, the first thing we're going to do is degauss with a degaussing coil the shadow mask at the front after warming the setup for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to turn down the G2 controls, which are right here on the back of the chassis. There's your blue, red, and green. So we're going to turn down the blue and the green, and we'll bring up the red to look at a red raster only, and I'll just put no signal into the TV, or I think I have a setting on my generator for just a blank raster. Okay, and once we have a red raster up, what I'm going to do is loosen this yoke and pull it back until it bumps into the convergence assembly here. And what that should do, and it doesn't really do it so great on these sets from my experience, is that'll give us kind of a multicolored pattern on the screen. And there'll be hopefully a large area towards the center that'll be a red splotch, and that big red blob, we're going to use the purity rings and turning them around and rotating them and moving these tabs closer and farther apart to try and center that blob in the center of the screen. Once we have that done, I'll pull the yoke back just enough to where we get a nice uniform red over the entire screen. And at that point, I'll bring the red down and we'll check green and blue to make sure that they're nice and pure as well. And once we have that done, we can move into the convergence part of the fun. But actually there's one step before that, because before we do convergence, it's a good time to set things like vertical size and vertical linearity, because you don't want to have to mess with those things later. Focus is also something we'll do at that time. So let's get the set warmed up, and we will start with the degaussing and the purity. Obviously, a good rule of thumb, though, is to reconnect your yoke, or else you're not going to see any raster. And also reconnecting the dynamic convergence board, probably a good idea too. This is why you should always give a very good look to your modules before you install them. This is the vertical module. A little loosey-goosey there. So good thing I undid this to touch up the size and linearity control. Happened to notice that. I'm also going to put I think I'm also going to solder these leads in for these transistors. Can't hurt, right? There we go. Looks a little bit better. No more loose parts. And I went ahead and added a little solder there to the transistor holders. And I marked our controls and cleaned them out with some fader lube. All right, let's get started. Also, while the set's warming up, it's a good idea to check the B+ to make sure that we're within range, and also our 24 volt regulation for all the modules to make sure that that's regulating properly. Also a good idea would be to check the high voltage at the anode, which I already did, so I don't have a video of that. But on this set, the manual calls for 25 kilovolts. All right, so we've got our manual here. This is the Zenith original manual, CM121, and it's for the 25 DC56 chassis. So in here, it'll tell you how to do a lot of the different picture setup options. I don't know why I'm out of breath. So we're gonna first do our vertical size and linearity, degaussing first, but then we'll check the focus, check our vertical size and linearity. And then we'll do our purity, which is always my personal non-favorite. And then we'll get into convergence. So the set's been on for probably about 20 minutes now. I've got the VG91 Sencore hooked up to it. I was using my leader, but I thought I'd give the other unit a little bit of a workout. So let me get this camera on a tripod and we'll start. So the first thing I did here is turned off the lights in the back so I don't have any reflections on the screen. And then we'll go ahead and gauss our display. All right, and now I will do the best with a mirror here to set our vertical size and linearity. It doesn't look too far off, but I'll at least show you the gist of that. So the first control is going to show the linearity control. You can see this will also mess with the vertical hold, these adjustments, so you may have to keep centering that as you go. So I'd say that's probably pretty circular as far as what I can tell from the mirror. I'll check our size. Seems to be pretty close right there. That's too tall. That's still too short. I'm gonna say right in there. Again, I'm half blind looking at a mirror here, so yeah, we'll call that effectively close enough. Okay. Now the next thing I'll check is the focus. And what we're aiming for there is going to be probably the most defined scan lines. That looks about the sweet spot right there. All right, now we'll move on to setting the purity. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to turn down the blue and green G2 controls on this set. So I'm all the way down. And I'm going to actually set the generator on this for a plain master, which can be red, I guess, with blank. We can turn our color control down. I feel like I might get something more than that. There we go. Not super bright. All right. Now what we're going to do is we are going to pull our yoke back until it bumps into the convergence assembly. Now again, this yoke is kind of loose and floppy, so. The idea here, on some sets it'll move farther back and you'll get a bunch of different kind of color splotches. But the basic idea is you want a solid red raster. I'm actually going to turn on the other colors too. Maybe I can get a little bit brighter of an image here. I'm also going to want to, there we go. So that's actually sending a white signal. And then it fades to nothing. I think there's something wrong with this generator. 1 second. Never mind, we're going to use the old one. I guess that's a scope trigger, that might be why. There we go. Thank goodness. Okay. Anyway, so we have a red raster. Yeah, I mean, the yoke is pulled back as far as I can get it, so it looks pretty darn uniform to me. I mean, we can definitely move these purity rings around, but move them closer together. You can see it kind of changes in the center. We don't want that. Move them the other way, and it kind of gets crappy in that corner. Nose back. And if we put them right about here and try and rotate them both together, it gets bad on the one side. We're basically trying to center solid color in the center. I'd say about where we had it was probably about as good as we can get it. It's pretty pure there. And the idea is when we move the yoke in, should have touched it. So on some sets you can get the yoke far enough back where there's actually a blue or a red blob in the center of the screen, and you can control the position of that blob by rotating and separating and, you know, moving the rings further apart, closer together, and actually get that dot centered in the screen would be the ideal way to do it. Yeah, that looks there about close to pure as I'm going to probably be able to get this thing without a defined blob. So at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the yoke back towards the center, or back towards the tube, make sure that that fills out into a decent shade of red here. See if I go too far in, it gets bad. But if we put it right about there, it's a nice pure red. Okay, tighten it down. Now we'll bring down the red, try blue, nice solid blue. Nice green. So the way they have it set up is it's basically, you adjust for the red, as I believe it's the weakest gun. And if you get the red good, then the blue and the green should be pretty darn good, if not better than even the red, from what I've read. Red. Anyway, so that looks pretty good. Before we do the convergence, we want to make sure that as we put our yoke back, we actually make sure it's straight, since we won't be touching the yoke further from this point. So it's not too far off. Again, it's fun to do this with a mirror. How's that look? It's pretty close to me. Tighten that up there. All right, let's go ahead and recheck our purity. Wrong button. There we go. There we go. Still looks pretty good. Blue is still pretty good. And green. All right. Now we'll move on to convergence. Just bring these back up here. Ourselves. Not perfect grayscale, of course, yet, but at least get all three guns working somewhat equally. And we're going to change over to our dot pattern on our generator. Okay, so the center of the screen, your screen that you're seeing right now, is the center dot on the CRT screen. It's a good time to mention too, if you have to stop and go back and double check and redo things, that's totally fine. Happens to the best of us. So now, using the convergence assembly and the 3 thumb screws on the back, we're going to do the static convergence, which is what basically lines up the 3 guns to converge at one point in the center area of the screen. So we'll start by, actually the easiest thing to probably do at first is to turn down the blue control, so you're just dealing with red and green. Okay. Now, let's say I move the green control here. See how it moves back and forth in a diagonal? What we're going to do is do our best to, the red moves the same way in the same plane. So, we'll do our best to put these on top of one another to form a nice yellow dot in the center of the screen with as little fringing of red or yellow or green, excuse me, as possible. Now as we go forward to do the dynamic convergence, that will, it shouldn't, but it will affect this ever so slightly. So we'll have to go back, keep checking it. The manual recommends doing that also. So now we can bring up the blue. Now the blue, as I mentioned, can travel both horizontally and vertically. So let us see if we can dial it in horizontally. Okay. And then we'll bring it up into position. Whoop, I said up. So I still see a little bit of fringing, so we'll keep working on it. All right. All right, for all intents and purposes, it's decent for what we've got here. And since I'm apparently completely out of breath and about to die, we'll call it pretty good for the center convergence. So now we're going to move on to the dynamic part of the convergence procedure. So for the rest of the video, we're going to be focused on this dynamic convergence control panel here, which is actually mounted upside down from how it would normally be when it's in the back of the set. So what we're looking at is our, this would be our vertical, red-green vertical, or bleh, red-green horizontal line control for the left side of the screen, right side of the screen, which is often a coil, top and bottom center. And then here is your red and green vertical line adjustment. Again, left, right, top, and bottom. And then you have the blue, left, right, top, bottom, blue horizontal. So anyway, there is a procedure to do this. For the coils, you need one of these plastic adjustment tools. Do not use a metal tool. It's kind of like an Allen wrench towards the end, the second step. Don't use a metal tool. You can crack that slug in there. Not to mention, I think you can also, you'll also be detuning it as you adjust it. So anyway, we'll start here. This is in our book. Move from color purity to the three-pole convergence procedure. So if you start mucking with these out of order, you can end up with a real headache. So the best way to do it, in my opinion anyway, is to go through and follow the step-by-step instructions. They figured out how to do it the easiest way at the factory, and I'd probably stick with it. So I'll reset the camera on the front, and we'll go through the procedure. Okay, so here we are. I prefer to use the crosshatch pattern. I guess you could use the dots or whatever you're comfortable with. I'd also might suggest turning down the brightness and contrast so you can get kind of a non-blooming type line. You want to kind of have the sharpest picture that you can get, so you can really line things up as good as you can. As you can see, we still have the center dot up here, so we can use that as a reference check in the center to make sure that our static convergence is still holding true as we go through the dynamic adjustments. So let's give it a whirl. All right. So still look pretty good in the center. All right. Step 1, perform static convergence. Good. Then 2, we're going to merge the red and green horizontal lines at the bottom center of the pattern using the red and green horizontal lines bottom adjustment. Okay. Hopefully you can see that down here. See, when I turn it fully the one way, they come apart. Turn it the other way, they come apart again. So there we go. Remember, red and green only. Now, the one thing we can do, we can always kill the blue, if that helps. So Now we're going to have yellow. So if we adjust that again, you can see when a nice yellow line converges here. I'd say that's about spot on. The edges are probably never going to be perfect. The extreme edges you may never get correct, so don't drive yourself too nuts there. All right, next, red and green vertical lines bottom. So this is going to be the vertical lines in this area. See how they come apart? They go way over there. So right in the center, it's about where we want it. So that looks really nice right there. Now we've got red and green horizontal lines top. This area. It's one extreme, the other extreme. Bam. Sometimes you split the difference between the top line or two, but that looks spot on. Now we're going to go to the vertical lines. And they're about as, that controller is about as far over as it'll go to get those in line. But hey, it works. All right. What was I? Horizontal, vertical top. Okay, now it does tell you to repeat adjustments 1 through 5 to achieve the best vertical red-green convergence from top center to bottom center, and to again recheck the static convergence. I'd say we're pretty darn good. Yeah. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. The controls will interact a little bit. Okay, now we're going to bring blue into the equation. That would be green. Okay. Alrighty. Blue horizontal lines at bottom. Good. Blue horizontal lines top. Surprised how close this actually is already. Good. Okay. Repeat 6 and 7 to achieve convergence of blue line with red and green lines from top center to bottom center. If necessary, repeat step 1 to converge the blue beam with the red and green beams. Looks like it could be a little higher. There we go. Let's do those steps again. Okay, that's good. All right, now we're going to move on to the right, so we need our tool. Merge the red and green horizontal lines at right center of pattern using the red and green horizontal lines right side adjustment. Boy, still doesn't seem to do a whole lot. So it is actually working. It's just the most minute change ever over here. And I almost had to back it out nearly all the way. I did check this coil, and it does check okay. As you tighten it in, just see this changing here. So I brought it as far out as I could get it. Okay. As close as that's gonna get. Where was I? Red, green, horizontal lines, right side. Okay, we'll do the red and green vertical lines right side. Put that in. Okay, that's good there. Now we're going to use the blue horizontal line with the red and green lines at the right center of pattern using the blue horizontal lines right side adjustment. Okay. Here. See, that's the thing. See how the curve isn't quite the same? I can either get it good here or here. There's no way they'll stay the same. I don't know if the parabola needs a little tweak or what, but this is about as good as I can get this on the right side. I don't like it. I don't know if it can be made any better. Maybe with some component changes you could get it closer. Then again, these sets were never perfect at the edges, so that may be as good as it gets. And it's going to be watchable. You might see a little bit of color fringe on that right side. However, everything still looks pretty good here. Except I feel like the red it's a little better. And our left side kind of got messed up here. You can rip your hair out, I'm telling you. All right, so that was blue lines right side. Okay, merge the red and green lines center for the left center using red and green horizontal lines left side. Interesting. My mistake looking at the vertical. There we go. All right, now the vertical. There we go. I was like, why is that getting worse? No. And again, this side here, it's also kind of splitting apart over here. Now the red and green are controlled together, so they're perfectly fine. That's why you see a yellow line here, and it's the blue that kind of trails away. And it's really just a splitting a difference between here and here, like I said. Okay. And now the blue horizontal. See, you can get it good here and bad here, or just the opposite. Even blue in this area is not so great. Same here. So, you know, you get it as close as you can. Might go through it again just to be 100%. Now, a lot of this won't even be that visible once there's a moving picture on the screen. All right. Well, without digging in pretty in depth and doing some minutia corrections to see if we can't get the edges a little bit better, which is not really a beginner thing, we could probably call that pretty decent. So let's set up our grayscale, and then we'll get a picture on this thing and see how it looks. So I'm going to do just a standard blank raster, and I'll go ahead and kind of center the brightness and contrast controls here. And then we're going to put the set into service mode, which is going to basically collapse the vertical deflection into a line. But before we do that, go ahead and we will turn down our G2 controls which oddly enough, don't give us a black screen. Anyway, so at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to bring up these controls one by one, ever so slightly, until we just get a very faint horizontal line. I'm going to start with red. So a red line there, just barely visible. Bring up our green to make a yellow line. Trying to get them to the same intensity. And then we'll bring up blue to make white. Now blue, even on good sets, doesn't always line up with the red and the green. So again, we're just shooting for the closest intensity to match the others. All right, so now when we turn it back into normal mode, we should get a pretty darn white, close to white raster. Since we set our purity and degaussed and everything, it should be pretty uniformly white. I do see some little bit of discoloration here, but we're going to work with it for now. We can always go back and try and redo our purity, but remember, when you mess with that, you have to go all the way back through convergence and everything else. So let's go ahead and look at a gradient here. Again, color should be off. Make sure we tune her in nice and good here. And to me, that looks the tiniest bit. Is it green? It's a little green to me, so I'm going to bring down the green hair. There we go. I'm not sure how that looks on the camera with the white balancing and all that, but that looks like a pretty decent grayscale on my end. So, and we should have color. There's our color. All right, let's hook up cable and find something non-copyrighted so it doesn't ruin the video. So anyway, there you go. There's a little bit of kind of a diagonal interference thing going on with the cell phone, but it's not in the picture. So complete with floral couch and Atari and everything in the background and a Betamax. There you go. Of course, there are many other settings you can adjust, like color killer and AGC and bright level, things like that, which I'm not going to get into those here since I would assume they're probably factory set on this unit anyway, and it's a little too tedious, but the manual goes through those and they're very easy to set. So if you want to go to that level, the next thing I'm going to do with this set, which I probably won't film, but maybe, is the controls in the front need to be cleaned. That chromatic switch, like I mentioned, is filthy and needs to be disassembled and cleaned. There are actually screws. If you take these knobs off for the tuner, there are a few screws back there, and it should just kind of lift up and pull back, and you can take the entire tuner assembly, and then you can take all of these controls should slip out the back for cleaning and work. So that'll be the next step with this set. As you can see, unfortunately, a lot of this new programming just seems to cut off the edges. There is no vertical side, or excuse me, there is no horizontal width control on this set. So unfortunately, we're losing a little bit over there. Programming has changed a lot over the years, so you know, these sets unfortunately aren't going to give you a perfect image when they've got all this tiny text and stuff over here. It's not gonna come out so great. But you know what? It looks clear. The color looks good. It's working pretty well. I'm pretty happy with the focus too. So I'm going to say that we're going to do a few more things to this, and this set will go into regular use. Like I said, I have an identical set upstairs that I did all the same things to, and it's been operating daily for several hours a day since 2020. So it's 5 years now of daily use, and it has not given me any trouble. So pretty good for a TV from 1973. Anyway, hey, if you stuck with me this far, thanks a lot for watching. I hope this was helpful. Again, I don't really do these for any monetization. Just hoping maybe somebody finds something useful here. And thanks for watching.